Look up the word crazy in the dictionary, and you might just find an asterisk beside the definition that says, listen to the Suebiquitous Podcast featuring Sue Duffield, and you'll find out what crazy means. Sue's travelogue journey of unfiltered stories, impossible miracles, and faith-filled fun will be revisited right here. So buckle up, and let's get going with this humorous travelogue of an unfiltered saint, Suebiquitous.
In this first month of 2022, we are celebrating great dads who in their own right have some amazing accolades. That includes Jeff Duffield.
Aw, thank you.
I know. I need a new dress.
We'll see what we can do.
Okay, so let me ask you, though, Jeffrey.
Yes.
What do artists like Rascal Flatts, Larnell Harris, Sandy Patty, Steve Green, For Him, Phillips, Craig and Dean, Glenn Campbell, Donny Osmond, CeCe Winans, Michael Crawford, and many others have in common?
Well, my first answer, I think, or guess would be, is they have good material.
Good material as in what?
As in good songs.
You are right, piano player breath. Yes, you are. Not only that, though, Jeff, Dave Clark, are you ready for this? I don't think you knew this.
Okay.
He was one of 3 songwriters commissioned to set the concepts of Henry Blackaby's Experiencing God to Music for artist recording on Star Song Records. I had no clue that he was a part of that.
No, I did not either, no.
He's also, did you know this? He wrote songs for more than 50 Christmas and Easter musicals.
Whew.
I mean, think about, we did his music long before we knew Dave Clark.
Oh, no, there's no doubt there. I did see the credits on a lot of music that, when you say we did, a lot of them we did in church musicals where I conducted choir musicals, that kind of thing. But yeah, I've seen his name.
Oh, it's amazing.
I knew the name long before I knew the person.
Right.
And been fortunate and blessed to be, to get to know in the last several years the person of Dave Clark. And, well, as we say in the music biz, when someone's not necessarily a well-known person or, a big personality or celebrity, but they're really good, we call them a monster player.
He's a monster player,
well,
but you know what?
Dave's a monster player and songwriter.
Yeah. But that's not what we're going to talk about today.
I know.
Here's the amazing thing of what we can do on the Suebiquitous Podcast. We can talk about the accolades and the awards and all the stuff that comes in for some of the people that we talk to. But we're going to do something different today. That's why we're doing this little setup, because we didn't hardly talk about any of his accomplishments.
You're going to be hard-pressed to get Dave Clark to tell you about all his quote-unquote stuff.
Right.
He's just not that type of person, and that's not what he's about.
No. So without any further ado, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Some people do so, and I've never had any further ado. So.
Probably Dave hasn't either.
Probably not.
But I know he eats sugar. I'll know that. Oh, my word, he's a sugar fanatic.
As we did this interview, he had sugar wafers, and I think he had a little bag of M&Ms.
Yes, he did in it.
He outdoes me, and I thought for many years I was the junk food junkie king.
Well, here we go with one of the sweetest guys in Christian music writing ever, Dave Clark. So, Dave, is this a gold watch wearing moment for you?
You know what? You've been reading my Instagram.
Yes,
That's.
I was worried that maybe you wouldn't wear your gold watch today because we weren't worthy of that. But can you tell us a little bit about that great story?
My dad and I were about as close as a father and son could be, and they had us early when they were young married, and so he and I grew up best friends. I was the only boy in a family of 3 girls, so I was the only joy in their life. When he passed away a few years ago, mom would start to part out the memories a little at a time, and she needed to do it. I wasn't ready to take the ones, especially the day she gave me his guitars. But kind of one of those funny moments a few years ago, it was first Christmas without Dad, and the elephant in the room is he was the center of the energy. And so I opened up a gift from my mother, and it was the gold watch she had given him for their 50th anniversary.
Oh, my.
I saw kind of an odd look on my wife's face, and I didn't know really what that meant till the next morning when I opened the new watch that she had also got me for Christmas.
Oh, my.
And so the where we ended up is, you know what? I wear hers in the day to day, and when I'm doing something that's especially significant, I think my dad would have liked to have been a part of, I wear his watch.
Wow.
And
That's
that
perfect.
includes almost every church service I'm at, if I'm on the platform, if I'm going back close to home where he grew up. And it's, you mark the memories in ways that most people will never know. And the fact that you read that, I write my stories on Instagram. And the reason I write them is so that my kids will always know what I was thinking about a certain thing.
Really, it has been a great way to kind of give your kids a real glimpse at dad.
Sure.
And I love that. I love that. Now, I don't know, and I got to be honest with you, I doubt our kids listen to the podcast.
I've not had any feedback yet that
No,
they do. No.
but I always, in the back of my head, Dave, I'm always thinking every time, could they be listening today?
But here's what I believe. I think you give them the obvious things, but I think part of the legacy is that you leave some things for them to look for later on.
Good.
And these podcasts are a great way for you to leave them something that when it's right, they will go back and it'll be a treasure trove.
Wow.
And who would know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who would know that that modern technology would actually be in, quote, our elders' favor as we get older? I mean,
So
wait, who are you calling elder?
Yeah, really.
well, I think we are older than
Electronic time capsule.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Speaking of time capsules and family and heirlooms, maybe we ought to start with where Dave comes from.
Since we don't know where I'm going, let's probably
Yeah,
best
we're not
to
worried
back up.
about we're not worried about where you're going, but we need to know where you come from.
Well, one thing I will say before you start, you know what I love? I think we may have seen each other and didn't even know it as kids at Orel concerts.
Yeah, oh, big time.
I bet we did.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk a little bit about your history.
I grew up in a little town in Michigan called Jackson, down the southern part of the state, and our family, we'd sing in about a 20-foot radius around the house. We didn't travel far, but we did a little record, and we sang old Dottie Rambo songs, and that that was, my dad loved music, and just when I was 17, I knew if I stayed there, I just graduated high school, I wanted to be a songwriter. And back then you couldn't do that and live in Michigan. And so I left. I had the ugliest car in Michigan. It became the ugliest car in Nashville, like overnight. It was in the time that it took me to drive here.
Were you known for that too, as having the ugliest car?
No, that was the beauty of my friends. They weren't ever honest with me. But it was a much like, I don't know when the last time you went to the dentist, but it kind of leaned back and there was gas coming up.
Yesterday, in fact.
Okay.
My wallet has a big hole in it as a result.
As well as three holes in a tooth.
Yeah.
Well, that does resemble my car. So, I came down here. I taught guitar at the store here, and because it was all I knew really how to do. And I didn't really want to be in the studio. I didn't want to pursue that, mainly because I'd heard me play. And when I ended up working for a group called the Telestials, and if you've ever heard of them.
Oh, man.
Wow,
And you may not know this, but the reason they got their name is they were the Celestials, but there was a typo in their first record. And so they became...
I love it.
So I played utility for them, which meant you played everything from fiddle to pedal steel to mandolin. And
Were you there when Roger and Betty Holmes were?
Oh, yes. Roger gave me my first job.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So Roger still kind of holds that over my head.
I'm sure
some
Roger
of the sweetest
does.
people.
Yeah,
And
that sounds
They
like
are.
Roger.
There's nobody like them.
Yeah,
that's
no,
for
they're
sure.
we had a
folks.
band. The piano player was a young kid named Chris Golden. He was still in
goodness.
high
Oh my
school.
gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was just fun times. But when the Spear family, they'd been my favorite group growing up, and I was able to travel with them for 5 years. And we were one night in a camp meeting in Iowa, and the congregation that night sang the old hymn that never gets sung, especially the verse that never gets sung, which is, I'd rather have Jesus than men's applause. I'd rather be faithful to his dear cause. And I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. And I went that week and I resigned from a job that I loved, and I told Brock I had to pursue my call.
Mm.
He said, "How are you going to pay your bills?" I didn't have
sounds
the heart to tell him I wasn't hardly doing it on what he was paying me.
I was going to say.
The Spears are like family still.
I know.
I was watching an old Tonight Show video the other night that had Desi Arnaz on it, and he talked about how he worked for Xavier Cugat back like 80 years ago.
Yeah.
And he struck out on his own, the same kind of scenario. And he's, Cugat said to him, "How are you going to pay your bills?" And he said, "Well, I'm starving now with the money you're paying me. So what's the difference?" So yeah, it's a.
I can do it from home.
And we had the same thing working with Sammy Hall.
Yeah, I'll bet.
The situation there. We went home to our pastor in New Jersey and sat down and talked about this with him, and he says, "Well, it's going to be tough for you to walk away from that steady $90 a week, but I think maybe you'll be able to do it."
Wow.
And the same scenario.
What year was that, Dave? Do you know about the time when you finally said, "Okay, I'm going to do this"?
It was 86.
86.
Yeah, I'd been married a couple of years, and Cindy had, we met while she was in college, and she said, "You worked while I was in school. You want to pursue this? You need to try it. I'll get my job teaching, and you don't have to worry about making any money." And I've never let her down. I have held up my part of the bargain on that.
Well, I always, and I've said this, and you can even verify this with the man behind me. I will tell you, I have learned.
Somebody there besides Jeff.
Well, you said one day, I said, "How do you make money in this town as a male, men speaking? How do you make money in this town as a singer, songwriter, artist, and marry somebody who has a job?"
Yes.
It's like,
Yes, we love insurance.
How come I didn't do that?
I don't know.
You know what? You laugh, but you had the blessing of a great gift.
I did. You're right.
I was never talented enough. I was in my hometown, but I was never talented enough here for that to be a temptation to pursue being a musician. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds awful, but
everybody, as I love to say, everybody has gifts. They talk about me playing the piano and all that, but as I tell people, you don't want me to fix your roof or your car.
yeah,
But we all have different gifts, and I sit and I listen to the lyrics of the songs and the melody lines that you put together, and I just say, how does he do that?
I don't know.
And it's a gift. It's a gift.
And I told somebody the other day, it's not that comes easy to me.
No,
it's that's what I choose to work hard at.
Yeah.
And that's good.
The writer Tony Wood, Tony, great songwriter. He came out years ago, and he loves to tell the story that he came out, and he had always heard that what makes a writer great by the books that they read. So he didn't tell me this, but he said he was looking forward to seeing what books I had surrounding me when he came to my house.
Uh-oh.
And he tells later, he said, I walked in, and there was not one book, but he had the entire DVD collection of Hogan's Heroes.
That'll preach.
That'll
preach.
And I'm not surprised in the least to hear that.
He said it just doesn't make sense. He said, you don't go to movies, you don't have friends, you don't. But you know what? I'm a good listener, and I'm a good watcher.
You are.
And I trust what moves me, and I've learned to chase that.
That's right.
That's good.
Well, and that's a like I say, that also, as you just said, you train your soul and your heart and your mind to be aware. That's my word, Dave, for 2022 is to become aware.
Wow.
And if something happens in the day, or just yesterday, I had several things come to my phone, pictures and different things people were sending me that were so grieving, actually. I mean, it just moved me to tears. And I thought, thank God for that emotion.
Yes.
That I can train to develop into other areas that God can use me in.
And you got to know, you learn what to do with it.
Right.
And where you take it. And your podcast is a great example that you become a conduit. And somebody said a while back to me, well, yeah, all these great stories happen to you. And I go, well, no, they're happening to everybody.
Right.
I think you develop a sense of what to do with a story.
Wow.
And I think that's why God continues to let you walk in those circles.
What was the first song you ever wrote, Dave?
Well,
That you'll admit to? Maybe a better question is, what's the first song you ever had commercial success with?
It honestly, that part of it, was like rhyming just was kind of second nature. And I would buy, my own money. I subscribed to an old magazine called Country Song Roundup.
Oh,
And it just put the lyrics in there. And I was so drawn to just good lyrics. And it was people like Dottie Rambo. And the other night we were at Slim Chickens in Hendersonville. You've been there.
Okay, there's another downfall. Let me just tell you something. Jesus lives at Slim Chickens.
Yes. So we're sitting there and I see this couple walking in, and I tell my wife, I said, "Oh my gosh." And in Hendersonville where we live, that you're liable to see anybody anywhere.
Right.
But she knew this was a different reaction for me. And she said, "Who is it?" And I said, "It's a man named Laverne Tripp and his wife." And she said, "Well, do you know him?" "No." But I said, "As a kid, I waited in line at the Masonic Temple after the concert with the Blue Ridge to get him to sign my sheet music to I Know." And she said, "You got to tell them the story." And I said, No. So just before, I didn't say anything, just before we left, I go up to get a refill of my Coke, and his wife's in line. And I said, "Hey, I gotta tell you." She said, "Well, you got to tell Laverne." So I go over, I introduce myself, and he said, and what do you do now?" And I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm just blessed." That there was no way I was going to even call myself a writer, or if you try to tell somebody anything, you're going to lose that anyway.
Yeah.
But it was just a neat moment just to say, I've gotten to meet some pretty cool heroes through the years that inspired me early.
Laverne was a big help to me, an encouragement to me about moving here years ago. It was very timely, my meeting with him through a mutual friend, and it was very encouraging. So he's a good guy.
And be it like Dave Clark.
Yeah.
Doggone you, you make me mad.
What's that?
Well, to make the moment about Laverne and not you. My theory in life is the bigger that you make the person with you, God opens doors that no man can lock and locks doors that no man can open for you. I wish I could teach that in this town. And over again, we have seen not the self-promotion, not the thing like you had no need to outshine the moment. And what you did was you just gave them, and probably in a time that they needed it most, since Rob, their son, has just passed away. So we don't know how God puts us in certain scenarios, and kudos to you for doing the right thing.
And it's not, it sounds awesome to say I was that sensitive. I'm just that insecure. I mean, let's call it what it is.
But think about it for a minute. You're that insecure, so that's good too. And that God can use.
I'm that dependent.
But songwriters are a different breed, and I'm never going to put myself in your position, but I have written about 50 songs, but I'm nowhere near Dave Clark. Oh no. But what I'm saying by that is I think, and I've listened to some of your workshops online, your YouTube workshop. I sat in on half of one at one in.
That's usually what people ask.
Yeah, I knew you were setting yourself up as soon as you said that.
In fact, I could just repeat the first half of most classes because this is.
But no, you're right. We went to a conference, and there was a couple of different people who were in the music industry as songwriters that spoke a couple days in a row. And the last day,
light came on, Dave. Seriously, the light came on.
Dave was the only one that I sat there. It was like a church service.
Well, it was. And for us,
I was moved by what he had to
say.
I know you're understated and you're not taking any credit. I realize that. But it's God working through you and your life and the whole thing.
It is, but it's also a guy who felt called to do this, and there were no teachers.
Right.
There were
And I
none.
have spent a lot of the years, I teach whenever I can, because I don't ever go in and say, I've got it figured out. I go in and say,
Right.
here's what I wish someone would have told me.
Yeah.
If you can teach people to reach for the right things,
Yeah.
they'll find it on their own. Good
Yeah.
Lord, we don't need another person writing like me. Write like you.
Well, I understand that, but still, you're talking some
Well,
quality
that's
stuff.
very,
here.
very kind.
Yeah.
Very kind.
I don't remember what you said because
That's the other common denominator.
But here's the thing, and Zig Ziglar says this, and
She's
has
a perfect
said this.
setup person,
I know.
Dave.
I've done
She's
that
a
all
perfect setup person. She will set you up. Oh, she's
Please
done
don't
that for
write
me.
endorsements on my website. Jeez.
She has given me openings for
Okay.
one-liners for 47 years.
I'm Gracie Allen for a reason, okay?
Oh,
You know,
it's lovely what
it
she
is,
does.
and I love it. I love it. I've loved it too because you know what? It makes for great humor and comedy too when we're doing that. But one of the things that you had mentioned was exactly what you said is that you don't necessarily teach, but you say, here's what I wish that I had known. And that teaches and that preaches. And that's the thing for me who now you have a degree from you are, I mean, should we be genuflecting, right?
Well, you should do that anyway, but that's another podcast. You know what? I do have a degree, but
Yes.
they say that you write songs for the girls that you couldn't get in high school. So I went to college for the teachers that I had in high school.
Now the retort to that is that you must have written a lot of songs, but but I didn't say that.
No. Yeah, that's true. So at 45 years old, I enrolled as a first-time freshman at
Did you know
Nazarene
this?
Bible College.
I did not.
Oh, see, you don't
And,
read his podcast.
Not as faithfully
Or I
as
should
I
say you don't
should.
read his Instagram.
No, not as faithfully as I
So
should.
it took
You're
me
right.
5 years. I was working full time. You know, obviously a parent. I wanted my kids to see that it mattered. And when I was younger, I wasn't smart enough. I didn't have any money, and all I knew was I needed to move to Nashville. And if mom and dad could have given me money, they would have. God, I got some of the best parents a kid could ever dream of.
Right.
But we didn't have a lot, you know.
Sure.
And so I went to college, and it wasn't to study music. I figured if I hadn't figured it out by now, I probably wouldn't. I went to study theology. I wanted to study how the Bible, how the dots connected.
I love
And
that.
it was a game changer. It was awesome.
Wow.
And we got down to a funny story. I've got a couple of books out that I've written, but one of them is for worship leaders. And so I get down to the very end, and the insecure writer, I was sure I had enough credits, but I wasn't sure. And my parents, you know, were flying to the graduation. My wife and kids were going to be there. So I had taught a couple of songwriting seminars at the college. So I asked the music guy, any chance I could get some credits for those in case I need them if we get down there at the end. And he goes, oh yeah, I think we could do that. He said, in fact, if you'll just take the written test for the music classes, we'll get you, you know, credit for that too.
Wow.
So I said, that's awesome. I said, so what are they? He said, well, the first test is songwriting. You just have to prove that you wrote a song. He said, I think we can do that.
Got that covered.
He said the second one is, it was something. Oh, you had to understand that a basic contract or something. It was music business. And he stopped and he went, you know what? Your book that you wrote is our textbook for that class.
Oh my goodness.
My wife said, you're the only one in the world who could stumble into that.
Oh my goodness.
So I was able to cut and paste the answers for that. And I was able to get some music credits.
You had to cut and paste them? You
Think
just
about
couldn't
it.
write them?
Music credits
You forgot.
from
Yeah.
your own book in the curriculum.
Oh, that is so wonderful.
See?
And you know what? You might say I'm not using that degree. I would say I am.
Yes, you are. You're using it right
Absolutely.
now, in fact. I can see it.
Absolutely.
You really are.
What else can you see?
Well, we do see your Twinkies.
Yeah, well, You just never know when you're going to need a Twinkie in our podcast.
The audience needs to know what a junk food junkie Dave Clark
They
is.
might not need to know that.
We're out to save him.
I thought
I'm sending him protein shakes today.
I've been told my entire life.
Will they wash down a sugar wafer?
See, I've been told my entire life that I am the world's worst junk food junkie.
You've met your brother.
If I'm going to emulate a
Oh,
junk
my
food
God.
junkie eater, I'm going to follow Dave. There's no
Here's the deal, though. You say you read my Instagram. Do you know any about the throat disease that I fought with?
I do.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
So for 19 years, I just couldn't. I
Right.
couldn't eat anything.
No.
And no one that knew me during those years. I've been healed for a little over 30 years now.
Praise
no one
God.
has ever given me any grief about it. But it might cut some years off of my life, but they're the ones in your 90s where they're not that good anyway. So I'm just going to go for it.
And my theory, my mother used to say, well, if he healed you once, he'll heal you again.
Well,
in spite
yeah.
of your craziness.
Well, all I can say is the times I've run into him has been in the pizza place.
I know. We're always running into New
other-
York Pie in Hendersonville.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
now probably Slim Chickens in Hendersonville.
As I call it, Slim Pickens.
Or if you ever choose to venture out of Sumner County and want to come down to Rutherford County, we have a Slim Chickens here too.
Is that right?
Yeah, you and Cindy, we have a date day down here.
Well, I'll pray about that and see if the Lord leads me that direction.
So if I said one day to Dave recently that if you are judged according to how much you're worth by the friends that you associate with, we feel like we're worth a lot just because we've been able to be more than just acquaintances. But just when we see you, it's kind of like we connect. But you also have somehow, some way, God planted you right next door to another young man, we'll call him, that has been really a good friend to you. Can you tell us how that formulated too?
I grew up as one of those kids in Michigan. I went to all the Southern gospel concerts, but I listened to country music
Right.
because lyrics like that were obviously not detrimental to your spiritual walk. As long as it wasn't the Beatles, we could listen to country music.
That's
Yeah,
right.
because they were clean. Yeah.
So I was the kid who would send off and get autographed pictures, and I still have my book of pictures. And one of those pictures is of the Statler brothers that I sent off in high school and got a picture of, and they signed it. And so about 15 years ago, I have a little studio at the house, and the engineer that worked up there, he came home one day and he came to a session. He said, "Do you know who your next door neighbor is?" And I said, "No, I know we got one that's been over there a few months, but I'm pretty private." He said, "It's Jimmy Fortune of the Statler brothers." I went, "You're kidding me."
Oh my God.
And it has led to one of the most incredible friendships. Actually, just on the hopefully 2 or 3 weeks away from finishing writing his biography.
Oh, wow.
And it's an unbelievable story. It's called
It is a story.
Untold Fortune, and I've got to go with him and interview all the heroes of mine. And there were times, I don't think he'd mind me sharing this, but there was a time a few months ago, I walked into his house and he was reading one of the chapters, and he literally had tears in his eyes.
Wow.
And he said, "How did you know I was feeling this?" He said, I never told you this. And I said, "You know what? I may be one of the few guys in town who also traveled in a family group run by 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And there were things I know you were feeling. You didn't have to tell me."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so we just sent the first half of the book to Don Reed, who's going to write the foreword, and Don read it. But beyond that, you know what? Christmas Eve a couple weeks ago, he sat in my living room, and my mom was here, and there was one day that you go out to the mailbox in our neighborhood, and you may be an hour or so because there's just so many neat people that live here. But he was doing a show at the Ryman that night, and he saw me at my mailbox. He came over and said, "How's your mom and dad doing?" I said, "Oh, they're doing good." Several years back. He said, "You know what? I got a few hours. Let's run out and see them." So we jumped in the car and we went out and sat in my parents' living room And he sat and sang for them for an hour the day he was going to go do a concert. That's the kind of guy
Yeah,
I want to
that's
be
right.
around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm a storyteller. So to get to write the journey that he has walked, there was so much that I learned in the process and one of the things that when you read it, you're going to feel like he's your next door neighbor.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
And
that's so
That's
good.
the way I
David.
want to tell his story.
He
That is so good.
I've had the privilege, of course, to play for
Yes,
him
you
a lot
have.
of times,
Yeah.
and one of his favorite lines that he uses is he spent a fortune making fortunes with all his kids.
Yeah.
And
No, the line is he's gone broke making fortunes.
that's true. That's true. You're actually right. I quoted it wrong. You're right.
I love the title, though. So the official title is Untold Fortune.
A story of an American dreamer.
Oh,
Wow. Just an example, like he called me one night a few years ago. We were in Delaware getting ready to do a concert. I was actually getting ready to change my clothes after setting up, and the phone rings, and it's Jimmy, and he's here in town. And just the regular guy he is, he said, "Man, I just want to call, see what you were doing."
Yeah.
He says, "I'm getting ready to go over to the Guitar Center. Want to know if you want to come with me."
That's him.
It's quintessential Jimmy. Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I love too, Dave? I love the bridge, the little
So-
walking bridge between your property.
You know the story behind that.
I do, but I want you to tell them.
So COVID breaks out. All of a sudden he's home and I'm home. And we got this little tiny creek that runs between our house that, when he first moved here, we could jump over that creek. But, so everybody's doing their social distance posting. And so one day I said, "Hey, Jimmy, put your guitar and stool on one side of the creek, and I'll put mine. And I'll get Cindy to come take some pictures." And so we were just showing that, hey, this is our social distance co-writing. But the trouble was, we're both so old we couldn't hear what the other one was saying across the creek. And we get to the part where we're supposed to write a bridge. Jimmy said, "You know what? We've been talking about building a bridge all these years." And so he got his son, I got my son, and we went out. We built one of the most beautiful bridges, and it's painted. You have to see the picture to appreciate.
It's awesome.
And my wife's a math teacher. His wife is an accountant, so they're both real numbers, and you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
And me and Jimmy, he just had a bunch of lumber delivered, and we said, "Let's build it."
And
So we're going to put a
sounds-
sign on it, COVID Bridge.
That sounds just like Jimmy. Just get a bunch of wood. We'll figure something out. Yeah.
Oh,
And
but
we did.
It's
You did.
awesome.
You did.
And
I love
when
it.
you have two visionaries,
Too creative.
who knows where it could go? But what a great picturesque.
Well, Nina is the best thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And
It
Jimmy
ever
will
happened.
tell you that, but she's the best thing ever happened to him because
Yeah. And
keeps him straight.
yeah. And she's a mess. And but
In her own way. Yeah.
they have become like family to us. And that's
Yeah.
that's one of those things that God orchestrates.
That's right.
That's right.
And one of the coolest moments, I don't know how well you know Larnell Harris, but Larnell is
Not well, yeah.
another person God put in our lives early on. He and Mitzi are godparents to our kids. And
Wow.
so the night that Larnell went into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame was also the night the Statlers went in. And back then you could only invite two people to go with you. And so Larnell asked Cindy and I to come. So it's he and Mitzi and Cindy and I. And there's the Statlers. So I'm sitting there going, what kind of planet do I live in where I get to sit
Really?
I
at a
know.
private dinner watching my next door neighbor and my best friend go in the Hall of Fame?
Wow.
So Larnell sings that night. Jimmy comes up afterwards and he said, I've been this close to Whitney Houston when I've never heard anybody sing like
That's
he
the
sang.
truth.
Yeah.
That is the
And
truth.
it is true.
Yeah.
He said, I hate to be that guy, which I'm already loving. He said, would you, if he's ever at the house, would you mind if I just came over?
Oh.
I'd love it.
Oh my goodness.
So it was just a few months after that, and Larnell and Mitzi had a Sunday off, and they came down. They went to church with us. That's just kind of people they are.
Yeah.
So I look out my backyard. I see Jimmy out next door, and he's doing something out of his backyard. So I called him myself, and I said, "Hey, Larnell's here if you want to come meet him." He said, and I'm thinking, this is Jimmy Fortune.
Right.
He's met everybody.
Yeah.
And
Same way.
he said, "Are you sure I wouldn't be?" I said, "Come on over."
That sounds like him.
And I stood there in my living room and watched on my couch Jimmy Fortune and Larnell Harris, the two of the greatest singers
Yeah.
that are alive.
Yeah.
Just talking about family. And I just, it's one of those things I just had to stop and thank God for letting me live the life that nobody knows the writers, which is what I love about what I do.
Right.
But I get to walk in circles that most people dream of.
That's true.
And without the writers, you wouldn't have the heroes. I'm telling you, you're creating heroes by your music, and you have been for a long time.
I thought I was just creating debt.
Well, we're all good.
Thank you. I don't mean to make light of that.
But that's the truth too.
That's no special gift. I mean, I've had that gift for 45 years. I can do that as well as anybody.
So you tell me when to shut up with the stories, but another cool story that you'll love. A few months ago, last year, I guess, my kids have grown up around singers, and they just think that's normal. So like, there's a group for him, and they had a song called "For Future Generations" that we wrote, and it was written about, we had a 12-year battle to have a baby. And when that song was written and recorded, and the long story is amazing, but the short story is, it was written about our oldest daughter, and the song went #1 on the day she was born. So they've grown up with these songs that most kids their age don't know.
Right.
So a few months back, she was getting some work done on her car out in Gallatin. So I go out to drop it off, follow her out there. And on the way out there, Dan Dean calls from Phillips, Craig and Dean. And he's, another group that we've been blessed to get to write with. And so we're talking. So she drops her car off, gets in my car, and she says, "Now, who's that?" He's talking to me. I said, "It's Dan." She said, She said, "You tell him he's my BFF," or And I said, "Sweetie, people are going to forget these songs, and there's going to come a point when you're going to be the only one your age that has any reference for these things that we've written." And we talked about that. It wasn't, moments, you can't create the moments, but you can allow them. And that's where I've tried to live. And there was a pretty cool conversation on the way back to the house. So about an hour later that night, I'm in the chair, and Cindy's gone on to bed, and I'm in the chair beside the bed where she has to get up early because she has a real job. And I'm sitting there, and she's got her computer open, and all of a sudden I hear her say, "What? What?" Well, that's not normally what she said. I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Somebody said that Nick Jonas just sang one of your songs." And I said, "Yeah, right." And we start laughing.
Right.
Well, then my phone starts blowing up. So I just send and evidently on The Voice, Nick Jonas on his first night on The Voice broke into Mercy Came Running.
Oh, man.
Some reason that it was right in that context. And he went through all the old Phillips, Craig and Dean. So I send my 3 kids a text. "Hey, because you don't want to miss this. Your dad just had Nick Jonas sang one of his songs." Well, I found out later my son sent a separate text to his 2 sisters saying, "Looks like I'm going to have to go downstairs and straighten Dad out on a few things." Well, you know what we found? So the phone's, blowing up. And I am embarrassed to say, but I didn't really know who this Nick kid was, but evidently he was a big deal. And so I go and I look him up on Google, and I find out that he was born the year that song was written.
Goodness sake.
And so this conversation that I just had with my daughter was all lies. Like for one night, I was a really big deal to my kids.
You were a real
Nick Jonas sang my song.
That is so cool.
I got to rewrite my bio.
Yeah, we had a connection.
We actually stayed in the parsonage where they grew up in North Jersey because their parents were Assembly of God pastors. And of course, that's the denomination that we grew up in. And
they had left there. It was a different pastor there by the time we got there. But we looked they showed us in the closet where the notches where they notched
how tall Nick was and his brothers. And, oh my goodness!
And I guess he had signed the wall or something. Like that, they had put it on crazy. There.
But you are a big deal. You are a big deal.
And as they say, that and $10 will get you a meal at New York Pie.
Well, actually, he sang just enough that we could actually get paid on
Oh,
that.
there you
praise
go.
God.
He sang enough of the verse that we
Hallelujah.
could actually turn it in.
Yes.
That's cool.
I love it. Well, you know this, Dave. I think I sent you the reason I'm highlighting.
Your hair or the show? What are you talking about?
Well, you can't tell by the hat that I have on. It's been naturally highlighted.
This is natural highlights these days, brother.
I get it. I get it.
I'm
sorry.
highlighting other silver-haired people like myself.
Silver-haired daddy of mine.
Your
Silver
gifts.
hair.
Silver hair.
Soon we'll be done with this podcast. Sorry. Go ahead.
You must have been with me the last time we sang that. We actually sang that exact same words.
Seriously?
I said, soon we'll be done with this concert,
That's crazy.
Oh, yeah, it was hilarious.
It's kind of like sending a text to somebody saying, "Hey, we're going to do this podcast," and finding out they're sending one at the same time.
That seems like I heard that happen.
I know. Listen, it was a God thing because I had already sent Dave, and I'm talking to Jeff here. I already sent him a message.
I discovered
through
that.
Instagram, and then I got up that morning. I said, we got to get him on the schedule, and then he had already texted
Like within 3
me,
minutes.
but I hadn't read it, and literally within minutes, Jeff texted you.
I just got seasick. We're headed to I'm my own grandpa before it's over.
Yeah, there you go. Let's all stand and sing that together.
Let's all stand. All right,
you and I
before we
probably
go, no, I want, because you know how I feel, first of all, about men generally who have such giftings, but yet at the same time, what you said earlier about why you're doing Instagram is for your kids.
Mhm.
Equally, what you have done in your workshops when you have said lessons I wished I knew. What could you say to the new dads, Dave, out there who are pursuing their own dreams right now and their kids are small? We see a lot of this going on right now where they're pursuing all kinds of things and the kids are left in a walker somewhere or a playpen and they're not paying attention. What is something that you could share with us today, things that you wished you knew when you were a young dad?
I don't know that any of us have it figured out, and the temptations and the voices that call, to career, it's always going to be a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's always telling you what you should do. And the person that modeled this best, I told you about the time my dad and I got to spend together, and the person that modeled it best for me on a career balance was Larnell Harris.
Wow.
And he still gets it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one night years ago when his kids were little, he was singing, I think it was in LA on a Friday night and San Francisco on a Sunday, and he flew home on the day in between because he didn't want to miss that day off with his kids. He didn't want to be somewhere on the road. Mm. And I remember there were times he'd come into my driveway and he'd go out and get the paper that I'd left out there, and he'd say, but I knew why. He didn't want me leaving it out there, but I knew why. It was because his son, when he was in high school, had a paper route. Mm. And Larnell got up every morning and he'd hurry home from the road to help that boy deliver papers. So that it wasn't that the kid needed the money. Mm-mm. Right. But the kid needed to know that he wasn't taking on what he was taking on alone. And that's the thing I've tried to show my kids is that you may not even get what I do right now. Sure. You don't know, but what you will remember is that none of my 3 kids will ever be able to say, I missed a field trip. Mm. Yeah, I had flexibility. I was always the only dad. I got to carry the cooler. I know that allowed me some flexibility, but what you do with that flexibility, right? And there were times they didn't understand why I was still up with a blanket wrapped around me when they went to bed looking at a computer. Yeah. It wasn't to try and get another song. It was so that I could spend that day with them. Mm-hmm. And when they go to bed, I'll work a little later. Right. But I want them to know that, gosh, I believe in them. I will be their champion. And if I can instill anything in them, it's to chase your passion. Yeah. Be passionate about it, but let God speak into it. And as a dad, gosh, the best thing I've done as a dad ever was I married a smart wife who's a great mom. Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
And we've tried to find that balance, and I'm she's the one they go to when they need help with their homework. I'm the one they went to when they wanted ice cream for breakfast. Whatever that balance is, but you also have to be consistent with that balance in your career. How bad do you want it?
Mm.
And every time in my life when I would have chosen career and I chose family instead, I found out the career thing happened anyway.
It did. And it continues to, honey.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know where it's headed.
No, I don't
But
either.
gosh, I have enjoyed, and after praying for 12 years for a baby, everybody said, well, sure, you enjoy it now, but wait till they're 2, or wait till they're 4, or wait till they're, and we've just enjoyed every season with our kids.
Mm.
Gosh, that's what I want them to see.
Yep.
Is I don't have it figured out,
No.
but God does, and I'm trusting God.
Well, my friend, that is as I would say, a gold watch moment. Thank you for being such great friends to you and Cindy, to Jeff and I. And this won't be the last time you're on the podcast, I guarantee, unless you don't want to come back.
Well, let's see what kind of editor Jeff is, and we'll make a determination.
We love you, Dave.
Love y'all too.
And for those listening, they need to get on daveclarkwrites.com. We could have talked about a million things on accolades and trophies and all those things, but what we really talk about...
And none of them would have been true, but we could have talked about them.
But what I love from the very first moment that we met is your heart for God, Dave, and your heart for your family. And that, my friend, that's the best accolade ever.
Well, it will keep you in the middle of the road on this journey, that all the voices that cry out are the wrong ones. And you gotta trust what brought you to the dance. Or wait, what brought you to the church?
The church dance.
The church dance.
No, we didn't have those growing up, but all right.
No, we didn't. No, we
Pentecostal.
have them. We have them today. You know.
Thank y'all so much for letting me be a part of this. I hope you have a great day.
And there you have it. Thanks, Dave Clark, for showing us all how it's done. And not just songwriting, but living life like it should be lived. Be sure to check out Dave's website. Again, it's daveclarkwrites.com. And also, thank you for continuing to be such a super family of listeners. You help us keep going each week. You can get on SueDuffield.com to stay in touch. And thanks, too, for posting or passing along this episode to your social media platforms.